Feel overwhelmed when you read research papers? Think research is being conducted in labs far, far away? Well, tune into the AlmaMAC Thursdays from 12 to 12:30 p.m. where we interview McMaster graduate students about their research. You learn about important research that's happening right on campus. Learn about what the guests did before research, how they got involved in academia, and what kind of impact their research can have on you. The AlmaMAC is covering it all from Thursday 12 to 12:30 p.m. on 93.3 CFMU, redefining radio in your community.
Hello and welcome to the AlmaMAC. I am your host this week, Adam, and today I have a very special guest. Would you like to introduce yourself, sir?
Hello, I'm Matthew Jordan.
Matthew Jordan is teaching two really interesting sounding courses this year at McMaster. But he wasn't always a teacher here. He also was an undergrad here. And then he moved on and did some other stuff, and now he's back. So the courses, if you aren't taking them right now, are one is a fourth-year art sci course on history and ethics of science.
The history of science, an introduction to the history of science, yeah.
Okay. And the other one, I didn't actually know what department that was in. It said Innovate?
Yes. Innovate is, from what I understand, a collaboration between commerce and engineering. But that course is actually open to all faculties, so it's not just engineering and business students. It's a lot of different people. But that course is on the history and philosophy and ethics and social issues around AI.
Okay, so that sounds really interesting, and we definitely have to dive into that. But
sure.
Before we get to the courses, maybe we can talk about how you got here, how you got back here. So you started your undergrad at Mac in, what was it, 2012?
2012, yeah.
Okay.
I started in the arts and science program. The reason I did that was because I was interested in a lot of things. I actually reread my application to the undergrad program a few weeks ago, and it's kind of startling how accurate it still is to this day. In my application, I say basically the reason I want to go to art sci is because I'm very interested in studying physics and mathematics, and I'm interested in studying history, but I don't want to have to choose one of those things. So I'd like to come here and do both. So that's what I did. And over the summers, I did a lot of research projects on like the history of physics as intended. And then I went away. I did a couple of master's degrees. And then while I was doing those, I thought to myself, I miss McMaster. I miss like the teaching here. I miss the people I was around. It was just a fun experience and a really good learning environment. How can I get back there? In my undergrad, I did a lot of TAing, and I always knew that I wanted to teach more. So through mostly luck, I was able to get these two teaching jobs. And now I'm doing more of the same, teaching history of science and this course on AI.
I feel like that's kind of unusual too. I'm just thinking about your application to the art sci program. It seems a lot of the stories that we have on the show, people will start in one track and then end up in a wildly different area. But you sort of had maybe it's because the topic that you were interested in, it can encompass so many different things.
Maybe. I mean, it's because I've never actually chosen one thing to do specifically, right? I never declared a major or anything like that. I guess I majored combined, as we call it in arts, in math and physics a little bit. But I was always doing other stuff, and I did my undergraduate thesis in psychology, and then when I went to grad school at Oxford, I was supposed to study theoretical physics, but then I switched into psychology, and then from there, I did my second master's in the history of science. So maybe I was on the same track the whole time, but if you look at what I actually did, it was math, then psychology, then physics, then psychology, then cognitive science, and then history, and now this AI stuff. So it's actually kind of all over the map, and I have yet to pick one thing.
Yeah, that actually sounds like the dream for me, at least. I'm pretty excited to have somebody with so much experience here. And part of that, I think, is the art sci program. That's something that I didn't know existed until I came to McMaster. I remember meeting somebody when I first came here that said they were, graduated from art sci. I was like, what is that? Do you like draw stuff, or can you like maybe describe briefly like the idea behind the art sci program?
Yes, art sci is a super cool, super unique program where basically in your first couple years you're given this menu of courses. Writing, logic, history, philosophy, calculus, physics, economics, statistics, and then in upper years, literature, technology and society, religious studies. Mm-hmm. There are other courses. And you just get to do all this stuff from this huge, wide range of disciplines and fields and ideas, and you're doing it with this one cohort of people all together. So the class sizes are very small, and you're kind of learning all the same stuff, getting this super broad foundation of knowledge. And then you can use that to either combine in another discipline. So I combined in math, namely I used most of my electives to take math courses. So by my fourth year, I was mostly spending time with the other students in the math and stats department, but I still had a couple of art sci courses. Mm-hmm. But some people don't combine at all, and so you can just use your electives to take whatever you want. So some people graduate having taken 2 courses from every other department, and you just get this amazing broad foundation of knowledge, and it's super, super cool.
Yeah.
And just the people are awesome, and the profs are awesome. I'm a big fan.
Yeah. Are you still working with any of the people from your cohort? Do you keep in touch, or do you follow them? Like, what kind of stuff do they end up doing? Do you know?
Well, my main circle of friends are mostly like art sci graduates, and some are in medical school, dental school. Some are teachers, grad school, law school.
Basically anything they want, it seems.
but some are, I don't know, musicians, journalists, politics, scientists. So the cool thing is like everyone in the class goes on to do something very different, which gives it like a nice non-competitive atmosphere. In many undergraduate programs, you and the people you're with are all vying to do sort of the same thing. Whereas what I like about art sci is everyone's kind of doing something different. So it's just like we're here to learn, and that's dope.
Yeah, that's kind of like, again, the dream. I keep saying this about art sci, but I feel like I'm a huge fan of art sci. So that's where you came undergrad-wise, and then you went to Oxford and got, you said, a handful of masters?
Well, if your hand has 2 fingers. I got 2 master's degrees, yes.
And was it sort of concurrently? Were they in the same department, or how did that work?
No. These were 2 separate, unrelated master's degrees from each other. One was in a year-long course-based master's in psychology, where I studied, like for my thesis, was on political polarization on Twitter. I did a replication of a study about what kind of language related to controversial topics on Twitter is most likely to get tweets retweeted. Okay. And the idea is like there are these like corpuses of words related to morality and emotion, and these moral, emotional words lead to more likelihood of retweeting. And the reason I wanted to do that is because there was this like replication crisis afoot in psychology. There was and is a lot of concern that some major findings are like based on statistical fallacies or logical errors or researcher bias or the failure to disclose non-results, leading to a situation where everything that is disclosed is like disproportionately weighted to things that are found to be significant, with all this other stuff kind of ignored. So I was very interested, and still am interested, in this reproducibility question. In fact, we just had earlier this week the first meeting of Reproducibility, TEA, a reading group focused around issues of reproducibility, where the T, meaning we provide tea and snacks. If I can promote that.
Yes, please.
Oh, great. That's in the psychology building here at McMaster, 11:30 a.m. Tuesdays. Okay. But yes, that's what I did in my master's in psychology. I did a replication of this study, and actually doing a replication of a study, you learn so much because you learn exactly what the previous, people did, and that was really, really interesting. So that was moral psychology. And then completely unrelated to that, the following year, I did a master's degree in the history of science, where my thesis was on the history of AI in Britain from World War II to 1973.
That seems like a hotspot to to study AI, especially in that time frame. So who are the major players? I'm imagining an Alan Turing might show up pretty early on.
Yeah, absolutely. That's where the thesis kind of began with Alan Turing. The focus was actually on the history of game playing as it relates to AI. So these early chess programs, and Turing had written a chess program in the sense it was an algorithm, but the computers of the day were not yet sophisticated enough to actually run the program. They couldn't hold enough memory storage. So he would go by hand and like run his own algorithm with a piece of paper to figure out what move to make next. But then it goes on from there. A guy at Oxford named Christopher Strachey wrote a checkers program for the early computers that were at the National Physical Laboratories in London and at the University of Manchester. And that was in the 50s. And then that was actually taken by this American, Arthur Samuel, who wrote a very sophisticated checkers player for IBM. And then throughout the 60s and 70s, I talk a lot about various people who were writing chess programs, including a guy in the University of Edinburgh named Donald Mickey and an American, John McCarthy, who has coined the term AI. So I guess those are the major players, but it's a long and interesting story.
I always thought it was kind of weird that the stories you kind of hear in the news around AI advancements, a lot of the times seem to revolve around these games, like Deep Blue chess, the Jeopardy chess robot or whatever it was. Is there any specific reason why it sort of people seem to gravitate around that? Is it because it's like a well-defined problem type thing and it's fun to do because it's a game, or?
That's a great question. I think that the answer is exactly what you said, namely, games are very simple. There's a set of rules that are well-defined that you can program a computer to understand and behave within. The game of chess, people have thought for a very long time that chess is like the highest, form of human intellect, and so chess grandmasters are seen as extremely brilliant. I think that is probably fallacious. Chess grandmasters are brilliant at chess, and some are brilliant at other things, but not all. They're just extremely good at this very narrow activity that they've chosen to become an expert in. And it's very impressive to be able to do that, but it's equally impressive to be able to play the harp well, or sew well, or run or swim well, etc. But we don't impute upon those like you are a super genius ideas. Whereas for a lot of these games, we kind of do. Real life tasks are actually much harder than chess in terms of the difficulty it would be to get a computer to perform them. So one interesting thought experiment is just, you might think that it's harder to get a program to play chess in the sense of like showing you what move should be made next. But actually the much harder task is to design a robot that can sit at a chessboard and move pieces accurately from one place on the board to another. That fine motor control that like a human child can do quite easily is actually a much harder task than the capacity to actually make chess moves. For instance, there's all this excitement about this OpenAI robot that can solve a Rubik's Cube. That's a really good example. The physical manipulation of the Rubik's Cube by the human hand is actually way harder than knowing the algorithm for solving the Rubik's Cube. So I think those are some reasons why we maybe mistakenly think that these games are like the be-all and end-all of human intelligence. The other reason, if we go historically, is that these founders of the field of AI were a very particular group of people, all of whom had an interest in chess in particular. So at the kind of founding event of AI, which was this conference at Dartmouth University in 1956, organized by John McCarthy, whom I mentioned, and some other people, there were like 10 or 12 people there. 7 of them were programming chess computers. So it was less that why does AI care so much about chess, and more so, AI was defined from the beginning as like the set of people interested in computer science and solving problems related to chess. And McCarthy's kind of idea about AI was that this field represents a unique set of problems, such as heuristic search, the idea of the idea in chess that there are like all these search trees that you could go down and you have to pick the right one. He was like, that is what AI is solving the like heuristic search problem. So that's one big area. Obviously now there are many, many more applications that we think about. Self-driving cars, diagnosing diseases, facial recognition, things that are good and many things that are bad, applying AI to like the legal system, etc. But kind of the origin story has a lot to do with these games, and that's why it's still such an integral part of the landscape today.
Yeah, that's cool. I don't know if this is true, but I feel like I remember something about that like Deep Blue Kasparov chess match type thing. He sort of staked the... People were treating this like, computer can never... Until it becomes human-like in its intelligence, it's never going to be able to beat somebody at chess because chess is just like such a human thing. And then they started beating them, and then it's like, well, actually, human things are a little bit different. And it seems like it's always like a line that's getting moved.
Yeah, exactly. And just like before, chess is just so unrepresentative of what humans actually do, right? If you say to a child, hey, can you get me the glass on the fourth drawer? Humans know how to do that, right? That's a human activity that children can do just fine. How was your day yesterday? That's like a human activity, right?
Yeah.
Chess is like has a very defined set of rules that's very mathematical and actually very simple. So I don't want to demean the chess grandmasters because these people are brilliant at this task, right? And I, for one, am an absolutely horrendous chess player. Interestingly, not horrendous, but not very good. I started playing about a year ago, and my progress has been incredibly slow. But interestingly, so were a lot of these people. Norbert Wiener, who is another one of these people in the early founding of AI, who founded a thing called cybernetics. He has a reputation of just talking about getting a computer to play chess, but he sucked at chess himself. Like he just sat in the MIT common room and would just lose to everyone who came in. So some people think that there's like this bit of like chess envy. People, like all these mathematicians, thought that like chess was like the genius thing to do, but they weren't themselves very good at it. That's maybe reading it into it a little bit too much. But I think we should marvel much more at very subtle feats of the human mind that we don't even think about as being that impressive, but which in reality are incredible feats of like evolution and cognition and our social environment that enable us to do pretty incredible stuff that probably will not be computerized or AI-ified for quite some time. Not that they could never happen. Obviously, it is a human brain is just as neurons and meat, right? So it's not like science will never have the capacity to turn everything we do into a computer. It's just that we need to have a little bit more respect for how impressive, for instance, the mind of a 3-year-old child is.
Yeah, grabbing a cup, it's like they can walk anywhere in the kitchen, but chess, it's actually on a grid, which is really convenient.
Right.
Okay, so we're going to take a quick break here. We have a ad to play, but when we come back, we will talk a little bit more with our illustrious guest. Here it comes.
Well, I was told that I could listen to the radio at a reasonable volume.
There are simply too many notes, that's all. Just cut a few and it'll be perfect.
By the powers vested in me by the Federal Communications Commission, I command you to get on the microphone in a serious manner and continue this broadcast.
93.3 CFMU, seriously redefining radio for over 30 years.
This is my boomstick!
That was deeply nostalgic for me because I had a radio show called We Want the Funk where we broadcast the best in funk music when I was a 4th-year student here, and we played that very same ad.
That blows my mind because it's brand new for us. So, wow. Okay. So you're into funk. Let's talk about that for a second.
Okay.
What do you play? Or you just listen, or
no,
actively funk?
I do, yeah. My main instrument is the piano.
Okay.
But the past 2 years, I have been playing much more of the bass. And I play some guitar as well. And I've just started playing the drums, much to the annoyance of my neighbors. I sit there and do paradiddles. I put a metronome on in my ears, and I put a podcast on top of the metronome, and I sit there at my desk doing paradiddles on a drum pad.
Paradiddle.
So, paradiddle. Oh, that's like a basic drum rudiment.
Okay.
Where I feel like the microphone will not enjoy if I start banging on the desk, so I will leave it to the listeners to look up what a paradiddle is.
We'll
But it's
throw
a
that in the
basic
show notes.
It's a basic drum drill.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is it in time with the podcast?
No. The podcast is just so I don't get bored.
Ah, okay. I was gonna say, like, the odds of somebody speaking at like such a consistent cadence, not zero, possible.
Yeah. But I am a big fan of funk music, and if
Okay.
the listeners of this show can take away anything from this interview, it's to go listen to the band Wolfpack.
Oh, I like them.
I'm happy to hear it.
One of our, we had a guest a couple weeks ago, maybe a couple months ago. We started our masters together, and we sometimes share music, and that was one of the first bands he sent me to listen to.
Nice.
They just had an album come out recently. Is that true?
They had a live album. They performed at Madison Square Garden.
Okay, sweet. That funk seems like the kind of music where the live album would be just as good, if not better, than a pre-recorded one. I feel like a lot of like rock albums I can just skip on that are live.
Yeah, this is like one of the best live concerts ever. And if you watch the video footage, it's being filmed not by like a professional film crew, but by this guy Ryan Lerman, who's like another really awesome musician in the same scene. He's just standing there like with a what's it called, like a selfie stick with an iPod, with an iPhone on it, just like filming his friends. So you get this view from the musician's view looking out onto the audience. Whereas a lot of like concerts, you get the audience's view looking at but here you get to see from the musician what does it look like to perform at Madison Square Garden.
That's sweet.
It's just so freaking cool. Yeah.
And the other thing that I noticed is that you're into improv.
Yes.
So how did you get into that? Was that like a professional development type thing, or just out of general interest?
No. I think I started doing improv in high school. Me and my friend Daniel auditioned for the improv team, and I think the origin story here is that we were both supposed to be like in band, like in high school, like the whatever. I was on the vibraphone, he was on the saxophone, but then we decided to audition for improv, and the things were on the same day, and we tried to do both, and we got yelled at by the music teacher, so we decided to do improv instead. Okay, but we did that at Langstaff Secondary School, and that was really, really fun. Mm-hmm. And then when I came here to Mac, I kind of didn't do it anymore. I don't know why. I guess toward the end of my degree, I started playing piano for the McMaster improv team. So when they would have like events or stuff, I would do like musical improv workshops or like help on the piano. But then when I went to Oxford, I joined the Oxford Imps, also as a musician, but occasionally performing on stage as well. And they are actually coming on tour to Canada over this summer. So I'm currently in the process of setting up some gigs in Hamilton and in Toronto over the summer with my Oxford improv group. But now that I'm back here at Mac, I have been doing some stuff with the McMaster improv team, whom I would highly recommend checking out when they next have a gig. I don't know the schedule, but they're a very, very, very funny bunch. And if you're a student here, you can just go and drop in on Tuesdays and Thursdays. They're a great group.
Cool. The reason I said professional development is I know that you're passionate about science communication and sort of communicating difficult ideas to anybody who wants to learn about things. And I also am into that kind of stuff. And I always hear this recommendation to try improv. A lot of people, especially in the sciences, maybe don't have the most, presentation experience or the most just like talking off the cuff experience. Do you think that you've, gained any of that sort of professional skill through that, or?
I don't know. I honestly don't know. I think that if you are maybe afraid of public speaking, or you get nervous in front of crowds, or you're not very good at thinking on your feet, improv gives you a set of skills that I don't think can be learned anywhere else. To kind of, what improv teaches you is just like, you just got to go with it. Like don't overthink anything. Just go with what's off the top of your head and have fun. and you very quickly learn to like trust the people you're on stage with, trust yourself, and it's a very like empowering activity. So I can see in that way how it would definitely be helpful if you want to be like a science communicator or an educator or anyone whose responsibility is to talk to people and engage with them. For me personally, I never had an issue talking to large groups of people. In fact, if anything, I'm like way more comfortable talking to large groups of people than I am to small groups of people. Like right now, one of my courses is 150 students and the other is 18 students. And the 18 student one I find way scarier because I can like see all of these people. I'm like, oh my God, look at these people. Whereas 150 students, they all just kind of blur together and I just talk to this, this crowd. But improv, in addition to all those other things, in terms of why it would be useful, it's also just fun, and it's a good occasion to just be silly. And I think that for many people, they don't have many outlets in which they can just be silly for no reason other than the fact that it's fun. And that's just useful to have in your life.
Yeah, especially, you're in university, you're in school.
Right.
It's hard. It's stressful for a lot of people, so I guess the take home here is everybody should go join the improv, or at least watch some improv, maybe.
Yeah, I think watching improv is definitely fun, but not particularly scary. Yeah. Well, it's scary if you don't trust that the improvisers are going to be good, because then that's like one of the scariest things ever. Going to see bad comedy, because then you just cringe up and it's real. If the improv is good, then you just let loose and it's just a fun time for you. But doing improv, that'll put you out of your comfort zone. So watching improv is definitely fun, and we need people to watch improv, or else we wouldn't be able to put on shows. But I would recommend doing it. That would be a good way to get out of your comfort zone, especially, as you say, if you're a person whose responsibility it is to educate people or talk to people or communicate in any way.
Yeah, you don't often get a ton of opportunities to, do a lecture or something like that. So this seems like a nice opportunity to do that kind of thing. So we're running close to time. We didn't get to talk about too much about the history course that you're doing, but I would definitely like to talk to you more about that at some point.
I'd be more than happy to. Well, I can give the quick pitch in
please.
15 seconds. Well, that course is just an introductory to the history of science, and that's an impossible thing to be able to do because obviously the history of science can, depending on who you ask, extend 400 years, 800 years, 2,000 years, or all of human history. For all of human history, we've been asking questions and discovering stuff and figuring out how life and ourselves work. So maybe the history of science is as ancient as the history of humanity itself. But this course asks those kinds of questions about what is science and what does it mean to do science and who is in charge of deciding what science is and that kind of thing, through a lot of case studies from ancient Egypt to the present day of climate change and artificial intelligence, exploring all these things through a historical lens. I see we're running out of time. I'll stop there.
Last quick question. Do you have a book you would recommend? Any topic? Anything at all?
Whoa, that's alarming. You should have prepped me in advance for that. The book I would recommend, well, let's see. The book that is the course reading for my course on AI is called Artificial Intelligence, A Guide for Thinking Humans by Melanie Mitchell. If I've assigned it to my students, then I might as well assign it to you.
Okay, I'll do it.
Thank you. It's really good. It's a very easy read, very readable. It's like I assigned it as the course reading like a textbook, but it's not a textbook. It's just a book you would sit and have fun reading on a weekend.
Those are the best courses, the ones where you don't actually have to buy a $100 textbook. It's just something you can get from the library and enjoy.
Absolutely.
Cool. Well, thanks so much for coming in again. If people want to get a hold of you, I'll share your social media. I'll share your
wonderful
course links and all that stuff.
Great.
And stay tuned for Get Lit. Here it comes.